Welcome back. In this optional training in the Overachiever track, you're going to learn how to captivate and connect with your audience through your product origin story, which falls into step 3 of your 5-part product sales sequence. Why should I care? Once you've gotten someone's attention, they know what it is and why they should care through your mission and future self vision, then you can back this up with your product origin story, which shares why you care so deeply about what you do and what drives you to want to help your customers. When someone can see your heart, they're more likely to trust you, connect with you, and see what makes your experience product different from other people offering similar products. While your product origin story is a helpful marketing tool, it's not absolutely essential to reaching mission accomplished. You can still design, market, and make $2,000 or more from your experience product without this, since you're already answering the question, why should I care? With your mission and your future self. So if you're feeling behind and want to stick to the essentials only, you can skip this training. And it also does not count towards the guarantee, though it can give you more clarity and confidence. Many people are concerned about not having the experience or the credibility to design, market, and deliver their products. They think to themselves, I haven't fully achieved this in my own life yet, so how can I talk about it? I haven't reached enlightenment, so how can I teach someone to meditate? And the truth is, the rabbit hole always goes deeper. As Jack Nicholson famously said, the minute that you're not learning, I believe you're dead. Years ago in high school, I read a little out-of-print book called The Minotaur, and I'll never forget this one scene in the book. The Minotaur in the maze has this moment of clarity and says something along the lines of, life is a never-ending spiral. There are moments when I look up and think, I have so far to go, and moments when I look down and realize how far I've come. It's so easy to spend your entire life looking up, longing for more, and kicking yourself for all the things you haven't done yet. But the truth is, if you take a moment right now to look down, you'll realize how far you've really come. By virtue of being you on this planet for the number of years you've been breathing, you figured out how to do something that someone else wants. Whether that's making the perfect bar of soap or unlocking the secret to a fit and firm body, you know how to do something that someone else wants. And the really interesting thing about what you do is that your greatest gifts often come through the hard knocks of life, the painful trial and error, the things that you'd rather keep hidden or under wraps. But the truth is, you're amazing just the way you are. And most people make the mistake of thinking that credibility comes from their expertise, their degrees, and the long list of awards and accomplishments they've got under their belt. That often prevents them from getting started. They feel like they need to prove themselves, they need to keep learning, keep studying, keep preparing, so they'll have the credibility they need to convince people to hire them. Let's call this resume credibility. And resume credibility is valuable, but it's not at all the only form of credibility there is, not even close. Unfortunately, resume credibility can easily become an excuse to either stall out because you don't feel ready, to say to yourself, if only I get that certification or take that course, I'll be qualified. Or it becomes a way to limit or pigeonhole yourself to say, I spent 4 years going to law school, so surely I must be a lawyer. Otherwise, those 4 years would be a total waste. What you're going to learn today is that nothing could be further from the truth. You're going to find the greatest sources of credibility for you right now without having to do anything more. And you're going to find that every experience you've had up until now has helped you get to this moment in time where you're poised to launch this product and have people say yes. Many people are tempted to throw away their past and start all over again. Things aren't going right, so they think they have to turn their backs on everything they've done up until this moment in time, rather than leverage all their experiences and mine their past for the true gifts it has to offer. Your product origin story, or what led you to create the product you're now working on, is marketing gold. Your story offers more credibility than anything else. As Richard Bach, the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, said, you teach best what you most need to learn. Now, most likely the reason that you're drawn to create the product that you're working on relates to the experiences that you've had in your life. Perhaps one of the experiences that you wrote down in our video on Maslow and the 4 mega niches. The truth is that I am uniquely qualified to teach the Experience Product Master class because I struggled for 7 years to turn my expertise into products that people would not only want to buy, but fully benefit from and get real world results. As a message and brand expert, my biggest gift is the ability to turn essence into form. So it was super painful to realize that few people truly recognize the value of messaging and branding. I struggled for years to find the right context for this work. And I told the story of that struggle in the very first video of our Experience Product Masterclass product launch. I want to share that story with you here again in just a moment because it's a great demonstration of how powerful your product origin story is. So before we go into my story and a few more product origin story examples from our students, I want to give you a little bit of context on what a product origin story is and how to craft one. So you can listen to the stories that I'll be sharing with you from the perspective of what are they doing to make the story so powerful. First of all, your product origin story is the reason why you're creating this particular offer based on your own struggles, triumphs, and personal experiences. What's commonly called your breakdown to breakthrough, or your mess to message or mess to success. And as you'll see in just a moment, I had some pretty big messes and breakthroughs leading up to the creation of this product. And as you'll also see by sharing my messes and my breakdowns, by sharing the times when I didn't have it all figured out, when I didn't have everything together, that makes me more relatable and the product more believable. Have you ever had the experience of talking to someone who has a really big ego and they just brag and brag and brag about how awesome they are? And even if they are awesome, your sense of their awesomeness diminishes with every word they say. Because the truth is that credibility is not something you can give yourself. It's something that your audience gives you. And as the great messaging expert Joel Roberts says, your credibility is a mix of your expertise and your humanity. And I would hazard a guess that if you were to put your humanity against your expertise, humanity would win 9 times out of 10. Because as Teddy Roosevelt said, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And your story is one of the greatest demonstrations of your caring that there is. Because if you didn't care, you wouldn't have picked yourself back up again after life dealt you that blow. If you didn't care, you wouldn't share the challenging experiences you've had. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be so committed to creating your product in the way that you're creating it. Now, is this making sense to you? Excellent. The interesting thing about the best product origin stories is that they tend to follow the same basic structure that all the great stories, novels, and films follow. Something called the 3-act structure. Now you can see a visual depiction of the structure here on the screen, and don't worry too much about trying to follow this exactly and hit each and every single point. I simply invite you to pay attention to the rough flow of ideas here, and then listen for this flow as I share some examples of product origin stories. Basically, your story starts with some establishing details, or what's called exposition, to situate your listener in a time, place, context, or scene. Then very quickly you try to hit what's called an inciting incident. In my case, it was completing a film after 3 years that nobody bought. And then usually after that inciting incident, everything changes. Life can't go on as usual, but for most people, they don't find the solution to their challenge right away. The inciting incident is really the beginning of a longer search or quest for a solution that leads to several more challenges along the way that builds the tension and the desire for a solution. So you've got a series of breakdowns and breakthroughs that lead to the climax when you finally figure out the big lesson that you needed to learn that has now allowed you to create your experience product. So when the resolution finally comes, it feels more exciting, relatable, and believable than if you had simply solved the problem right out of the gate. So that's the basic 3-act structure or hero's journey that the greatest stories of all time follow. Now don't worry, you don't have to get this exactly right. You don't have to hit all of these points. All you need to do is identify your inciting incident, share a little bit of establishing information to contextualize that incident, and then identify 1 to 3 more story points where things seem to get worse before they got better, before leading up to your final breakthrough that allowed you to discover the solution that you're now here to share. And then at the end, to bring it back to your audience and invite them to take some kind of action, whether that's signing up for something, reading something, watching something, or learning something. That's the basic structure for a powerful product origin story that will captivate and connect with your tribe and provide more credibility than you realized you had. So just to recap, you want to share your lowest point, greatest challenge, or the inciting moment that started you on this journey. You want to normalize the struggle of how you tried and failed and tried and failed, and ideally mirror the current experience that your audience may be having with your topic. The goal here is to give them hope that if you were able to get the results that you did despite the challenges that you had, that they can do it too. Then you want to express the insights you learned through your failures and challenges that allowed you to craft a better way to do things and get the results that you ultimately got. Then at the end, you want to pivot from you to your audience by letting them know why you decided to share this with them, and end with an invitation to take some kind of action. Now, what I'd like to do next is play back the origin story that I shared in the Experience Product Masterclass Marketing. It's a lengthy video, and the reason why I want to show you this entire thing now is so you can see that origin stories can take 20 seconds or 20 minutes. Once you have a sense of what the origin story behind your product is, then you can expand it into a polished launch video like what I've done here, or contract it to share quickly on the fly. So let's start with the long version so you can see the full 3-act structure at work before I share the 15-second version of the same story plus some other shorter examples from some of our students. Keep in mind that this 19-minute story was part of a longer 40-minute video, so it's not meant to stand alone like what I'm showing you here. If you're the kind of person who likes to read along and have models to follow, you can also find the transcripts for all the stories that I'll be sharing with you here in your worksheets for this training, plus some additional student stories as well. Now, I want to take you back to 2010. Before I started my business, I was working as a documentary film director in Los Angeles, and I just wrapped a 3-year film series on drug addiction and recovery. I was really proud of it, and I knew that it had the potential to help a lot of people. But the producers hadn't put too much thought into how they were going to actually market the film. They were hoping, as many entrepreneurs do, that word would just get out somehow, and the market would just kind of find them. As a result, less than 1,000 people ever saw it, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I just wasted 3 years of my life. I learned the lesson that it doesn't matter if you've got the greatest message in the world if nobody's paying attention. Fast forward 1 year, I got a day job at a nonprofit, and while I was there, I noticed something super interesting. These guys were really good at making everything an experience, as they tried to get their ideas out into the world, into people's minds, and most importantly, getting them to actually take action around their cause, getting them to engage. From huge galas and events to civil disobedience, to creative ways to get celebrities involved in their cause, these guys were geniuses at creating unforgettable experiences that moved people to action. And I could see that it was thanks to this one master skill of using experiences to get people to first notice and second, engage with their message, that they were able to really quickly make huge progress on the political issues that matter to them. Now, the difference between the nonprofit world and the documentary world couldn't have been more stark. Fast forward another year. I was in business for myself, and everybody told me that if I wanted to get my message out to a lot of people quickly, I'd need to create an information product and sell it online to a lot of people somehow. They weren't too clear on that last part though, and I've heard people calling them home study courses, digital products, self-paced learning, group programs, and online courses. Whatever you call them, they're products that you create once and then sell over and over, which is a great way to leverage yourself and have more impact helping more people in less time. Anyway, this sounded great to me, and so I learned everything that I could about how to do that. I bought every book and every online training program that I could get my hands on. I went to seminars, and I even invested in expensive masterminds to learn everything there was about creating and marketing info products. And 1 year later, I was the proud mama of an info product designed to help people grow their business through the power of their message and their brand. And I was convinced it was the best course of its type in the whole wide world. And my only challenge now was finding people to buy it. I put literally months and months and tens of thousands of dollars into creating the launch materials, the webinars, the emails, finding partners. I even paid a well-known copywriter $10,000 to write my sales page. Now, I wish I could say that this story had a good ending, but it doesn't. The vast majority of people never finished the course. They got stuck, demotivated, and either abandoned the program partway through or never started it. It was so frustrating because I could see that the small fraction of students who actually did implement what they learned, they got great results. And over 4 years, only a few hundred people bought the program, and it never had the impact that I dreamed and hoped it would. I was devastated. I put everything into my product, all my money, my time, blood, sweat, and more than a few tears down the drain. It was my life's best work, the best that I felt I was capable of producing. And after so much time, countless hours of labor pain and efforts, this was all I could accomplish. I felt like I'd let myself and a lot of other people down that I could have helped. And as you can imagine, this brought me to a critical moment in my business, a moment of both despair and taking a hard look in the mirror. Why wasn't this working for me? And what was I doing so wrong that all of these people weren't getting results from my program? After almost a year of heartache, worrying about my business, and feeling like there was something wrong with me, I was ready to give up and get my day job back. Perhaps I just wasn't cut out to do this. Maybe other people were smarter than me, or they had some special ingredient that I clearly couldn't figure out and wasn't born with. And then one day, while out walking with my husband Murray, he said something that reminded me of my time making documentary films, and the solution just finally hit me. Documentary filmmakers were a group of just passionate people totally in love with their information. And they truly honestly believed that their information would go viral simply because of how important their message was and how shocking their statistics were. They thought the information alone was enough to make a difference, change the world, and get paying customers. But the numbers tell a different story. Only 5% of documentaries are ever seen by more than 1,000 people. Remind you of anyone? And then I thought back to that nonprofit I worked for, and I thought about how they were making huge progress in the political world, getting important legislation passed, getting everything seen and heard, and creating huge engagement. Both groups were in the idea business, but the nonprofit had succeeded in getting their ideas out in the right way, and the documentary people, they hadn't. Then I had one of those moments when the clouds part and total clarity comes. You know the ones. And in that moment, I realized that I'd been taught by all the experts and gurus that my secret sauce, my highest value to my customers, was my content, my information. I realized that I built my business like the documentary people, instead of the nonprofit people. I'd been taught that my product needed to have the thud factor, named after the sound that a lot of information makes when it lands on your doorstep. I'd been taught that the louder the thud, the more valuable the product would be perceived. And I definitely took the thud factor approach with my first product. I suddenly realized that my thud was actually the sound of my customers' hopes and dreams dying. The sound of them giving up, walking away, not completing, not implementing, not engaging, and not getting any results whatsoever, much less the better future that they imagined. Odds are that you've had this experience too, and I like to call it the downward death spiral. So think back to the last time that you bought an info product, online course, or home study program of some kind. Now, as you made the decision to go for it, perhaps you remember that feeling of euphoria you felt just as you were hitting the buy button. You were so excited to get your hands on it and for what it would mean to you and your life. You may have even felt a little optimism that things were about to change for you. Then, a few moments later, that email confirmation arrives, and for 97% of people, one of 4 things instantly happens. Number 1, it takes a moment for the confirmation email to land, or the email lands in your spam box, and while you were waiting for that email, you got distracted and you think, I'll check in on this later. Number 2, you get this rapid-fire series of emails and confirmations and receipts and getting started message in your inbox, and you think, whoa, I don't have time for this right now. I'll come back to this later. Number 3, You actually open one of those emails and you see these big block paragraphs of text and you think, no way do I have time to read all this right now. I'll come back to this later. Or number 4, you actually do read the email, you click through, and then you land in a membership site where the first thing you see are documents and videos and mass quantities of information waiting for you to dive in. And if you've made it this far, your first thought is, gulp. I don't have time for all of this right now. I'm gonna have to come back to this later. And the problem is that for 97% of people, later almost never comes. And that spells disaster for both you and your customers. This is an example of the downward death spiral, where a series of very small negative experiences that are, of course, never intended by the product creator occur and stack up quickly, one on top of the other. And it's this overwhelm that takes most people out of the game completely. Right on the spot, they're done. And that's exactly what I had done with my first product without even realizing it. Lengthy emails right out of the gate, a lot of tasks to do, videos to watch. I'd started them on a downward death spiral of overwhelm, which inevitably develops into frustration and then procrastination, unfulfilled expectations, refunds, and no repeat business. I took most of my customers out of the game before they ever even suited up. What I came to realize is that the vast majority of online programs and courses out there are creating a downward death spiral and killing any chance of customers getting results with those products. And once I had this epiphany, everything just fell into place. A huge feeling of relief and gratitude washed over me because I realized that there was nothing wrong with me. There wasn't anything wrong with my information. There was simply something wrong with how I was putting it out there. I also realized the solution had to instead be based on what the nonprofit was doing, creating fun, engaging experiences that served as a hook to grab people's attention and keep it as they delivered the information that they wanted to deliver. So consider for a moment that as human beings, we get hooked on what feels good. We ride roller coasters again and again and again because we get a rush of adrenaline. We line up to be the first to see a new movie. We scale mountains and rappel off cliffs and jump out of planes for the experience of it. And even if you're not the daredevil type, you probably still appreciate eating at a gourmet restaurant, seeing your favorite band in concert, or going on a luxurious vacation. In fact, research has shown that in general, we're happier when we spend money on experiences, not possessions. And we tend to remember those experiences more vividly too. Think for a moment about your favorite teacher, one that inspired you. And I bet you can remember their name and picture what they looked like. I also bet you can probably remember something that they taught you. And I'm also guessing that the way they taught it to you wasn't like any other teacher. For me, my favorite teacher was Mr. Gonzalez. He taught European history, and the stories he told during class have stayed with me to this very day. I especially remember the way he painted the picture of life as an aristocrat at Versailles. So I remember how he said that they grew their fingernails on their pinkies super long, since the custom was using their pinkies to just politely scratch on the doors instead of knocking. And I also remember how he said that they didn't install a sewage system at Versailles, so the aristocrats would simply relieve themselves in the corners of the castle, and the whole building smelled like an open-air toilet. Now those images are things that I'll never forget. And we know that teachers who use experiential teaching in the classroom get better results. And for me, this was just more proof that I was on the right track. And so I took everything I'd learned as a storyteller, filmmaker, teacher, author, speaker, and coach. I thought about my teachers who had made an impact on me. I studied the world of video games, apps, reality TV, and entertainment to see how they got people hooked on a specific game or show that went viral. And I distilled all of this down until I had 10 core experiences. And I realized that they needed to be in a very specific sequence, which I called the experience formula. And this is the formula that would dramatically increase the amount of people investing in my products and programs and engaging with the information, taking action, getting concrete results that change their lives, and then coming back to buy again and again. And once I had the experience formula, I decided to run a small experiment to see if the ideas would actually work in the real world, in my business with my tribe. And what happened then? Well, it completely blew our minds, proving every theory it had correct. And as I give you the case study, please keep in mind that these are not typical results, and when you implement the experience formula, you may not have this kind of crazy success your very first time, but who knows? You may beat them. We built the experience formula into the webinar script for my program Call to Adventure. We had 508 people watch the webinar live, and 106 of them joined our program at a $497 price point, a 21% conversion rate. Now, most webinars convert much lower than that, between 3 to 10% in fact. So we were stoked, and so my first theory was proved correct. When we use the experience formula in the marketing process, we sell more. And in our first test, we instantly put over $53,000 into our bank account. And then we took it one step further. In the program, I implemented some core experiences from the experience formula that I was developing. And I've got to say that a lot of it was very different than what other courses and programs were doing. I mean, I broke all the rules of product creation that I'd learned. And it made me a little nervous, to be honest. There was no thud factor. I taught live using a call and response format. I told story after story. I had students doing exercises with their family and with each other. I asked them to speak up at any time they felt stuck or confused. And I integrated my students' experiences directly into the content of the course. So what happened? First of all, our engagement went through the freaking roof. And as we've already discovered, on average, just 3% of people will ever go through an info product. But simply through adding in the 10 core experiences in a very special way, we saw a 76% attendance rate live each day, 3 hours a day for 5 days straight. That's a massive improvement over the standard 3%. We'd never seen anything like it, and that's how we knew that we were onto something powerful. And they stuck around, and they bought from us again. In less than 60 days, we made over $138,000 from this group of 108 students who joined this low-cost experimental program. And more importantly, they got serious results and gladly shared their successes with their friends, which sold the program even more. I got so excited that I started telling my friends and my students and my clients about our results. And they started integrating the 10 core experiences into their products. Like my student Richard Zaltner, who had spent his entire life in academia, when he applied the experience formula to his material and created his very first online product, he instantly brought in 5 new customers and a total of $4,985 with more to come. And like my friend Josh Turner, known as the world's LinkedIn selling expert, he had just wrapped a $1.6 million launch of an existing product, and after he heard my results, he wanted to apply the experience formula to his brand new class of 700 students. So I consulted with him and his team, and what happened next stunned even me. So in Josh's own words, we had a much more engaged group. People were really into the contest, and the game helped to give them that extrinsic motivation they needed to continue plugging away and complete the program, so they could get the results that we promised they'd achieve. It was definitely the highest level of completion that we've ever had in any of our programs. Halfway into the course, we noticed that 92.7% of purchasers had taken action, and refunds were down approximately 70%. That's huge, and it made me feel like we were really doing right by our clients and investing in their success. And it made me proud to see so many people doing the work and getting results. My team really loved it as well. It was a lot more fun to do it this way. And of course, when our team is having fun, our clients can feel that. And it was a really big impact on everything. And then there's Troika St. Germain, a spiritual teacher. And here's what she had to say. I named my product with Marisa's formula, wrote copy as she instructed, planned my modules based upon her system, and created an email sequence too. I offered a beta price to the first 25 participants and have 22 so far at $297 each. That's over $6,500. When official promotion starts in a few weeks, The product will be $497, but I can't believe that I made $6,534 and the real promotion hasn't even started. By now, we've seen the experience formula work in industry after industry, on every type and kind of product, from info products to online courses, from one-to-many group coaching programs to one-on-one coaching or consulting, and even service businesses. And it's worked at every stage of business, from well-established businesses to people who didn't even have a business yet. So with the success of Call to Adventure and the success that my students were seeing, I realized that we were reinventing how products are created. In fact, Call to Adventure wasn't an information product at all. It was a totally new class of products that the world had never seen. It was an experience product. And I knew I had to start teaching this by creating an experience product to teach experience products. And the Experience Product Masterclass was born. And I'm gonna stop it there. How did that land for you? Do you feel more connected with me and the promise of what experience products can do for your business than you would have if you had just heard our product mission to design, market, and make $2,000 or a whole lot more from an experience product in 10 weeks or less? After I finished this story, I went on to invite my viewers to continue watching and learn one of the core experiences in the experience formula. What I want you to see is that your personal story of mess to success, breakdown to breakthrough, can give you more clarity than a long list of awards and accomplishments. The reason why is that your story is relatable. Your story allows people to see your message and your ideas in a real-life scenario. By highlighting a context or situation in which you or someone else struggled with the thing that you now help people solve, you're allowing your audience to see how this problem, challenge, issue, or possibility may be showing up in their lives. You're also implicitly showing a path forward, a way to solve the problem or achieve an outcome. You're showing what's possible. Your product origin story is marketing gold. It can take 15 minutes or 15 seconds or anything in between. If I wanted to share the same story in 15 seconds, I would say something along the lines, after 7 years of trying and failing to turn my knowledge and expertise into successful products, I realized that I was leaving 97% of my customers behind. And I wasn't alone. Just when I thought I wasn't meant to be an entrepreneur, I discovered a new kind of product that allowed me to 10x my sales and my customer results. While the short version doesn't convey the depth and nuance of the original, it does allow me to quickly convey my basic story, and sometimes you just need to get to the point. The most effective stories, whether they're 15 minutes long or 15 seconds, provide contrast between where you are now and where you were. They provide contrast between the problem and the solution. This is really important because contrast does two critical things. The first thing it does is create dramatic tension. There is no story or movie without tension. Watching someone succeed day after day after day without any challenges, obstacles, or doubts would be really, really boring. Now, the second thing contrast does is it showcases transformation. There's a clear before and after picture. The best before picture allows your audience to identify themselves and their current situation in your experience or in the character's experience. Ideally, the character in your story, whether that's you or someone else, has it worse off than your audience currently has it. This gives them confidence that they can do it too. The best after picture shows the win, the desired situation or result that they want. But that after picture only becomes believable and relatable by showing the journey or the struggle across the gap between where you are now and where you were. When you focus on your struggle, you're able to add humility and relatability to your current accomplishments and make them seem more achievable to your tribe. If you just go right in and talk about all the success you have, all the money you're making, and all the spiritual enlightenment that you're experiencing, or whatever it is that you do, it can come across as unrelatable at best, arrogant, self-aggrandizing, and bragging at worst. But if you show how you were able to overcome the obstacles in your life and how you beat the odds to create your current success, you become human and relatable. Someone they look up to because you solved a problem or overcame a challenge they're currently struggling with. And that gives you credibility because you're showing, not just telling, how you got to where you are today. For example, you became an incredible healer, not just because you spent 10 years in school, but because you overcame a debilitating illness in your life and you know what it takes to change your habits and behavior around health and really get well. Or maybe you helped a parent, a child, your brother or sister get well. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you overcame a struggle in your life or in the life of someone you really cared about. You overcame a struggle that your audience wants to overcome. So you get it. You get them. You understand their experience. And because you understand them, not just intellectually, not just because you have a certification or degree, but personally, because you've experienced what they're going through, that gives you huge credibility. While a PhD from Harvard does help, what people want to know most is that you understand their needs and you care. Are you getting this? Can you see how this works? I'd like to share another product origin story from my mentorship student, Kristina Shmulova. I asked her to do an audio recording of her story so you can hear this in her voice. In case you're wondering where her accent comes from, Kristina is from Siberia.
5 years ago, I was a sad girl. "If I can't make you happy, then I don't know who can," my husband shouted at me. I know what he really meant to tell me was how much he loved me, how much he sacrificed himself to continue loving me, and how unappreciated he felt in this relationship. I was exhausted. One day would turn into another, and we both kept looking for our solution. It wasn't easy, but deep inside I knew what needed to happen. Turned out we both knew. The last 2 years, trying to find ways to connect, we continued drifting apart from each other. Drained from it all, I still loved him, but I wasn't happy. In fact, it felt like I could never be happy again. Maybe this is how life is when you grow up, I thought, and that kept breaking my heart over and over. 1 year later, he said, "You are a strong woman," and walked out of the door. Trying to numb and hide what felt like torn pieces inside of me, I kept crying and smoking cigarette after cigarette for the next 2 weeks. I had my freedom. I didn't have to work on a relationship that wasn't working any longer. I didn't have the job of making anyone happy. I quit, and I was fired at the same time. My ego roared. My soul ached. And I was terrified by my freedom, because I had to ask, now what? What do you want? What will make you happy? I'm forever grateful for that day he doubted that anyone could ever make me happy, because it brought me to understand that nobody needs to make me happy, because no one can make you happy until you can be happy on your own. Simple, yet it took me nearly 30 years to come full circle with it, and I wanted to share the lessons I learned with you. I created the Love Yourself First program to help my soul sisters reconnect to their feminine power, unleash their soulful wild woman, and open to receiving love no matter how many heartbreaks they had. In just 5 weeks, and I invite you to join me so you can experience what it's like to feel loved, loving, and loved.
If you're a woman, were you able to connect with Christina's story? Absolutely, right? It's super compelling to understand the reason why someone's created a product and the personal experiences they've had that have led them to do what they do. It takes your marketing beyond sales and into connection. Now let me share one more lesson on how to tell a truly great product origin story. Do you remember show and tell from grade school? You know, bringing something to class, such as your favorite game or your pet turtle, and then telling your classmates all about it. Now, it would be a totally different experience if it was just tell and tell, right? So if your classmates couldn't see what it was that you were talking about, it would be not the same thing. Now, most people, when they first start sharing their stories, do it in a way that's focused on telling rather than showing. And because they're so focused on telling, their audience can't imagine themselves in the scene. And because they can't picture themselves in the scene, they can't fully relate to your experience. This kind of story usually sounds more like a bio. First, I went to college and I had no idea what I wanted to study, so I ended up taking cognitive science, and that fostered in me a lifelong passion for the brain and how it works. When I graduated, I decided to get some more experience in this area, and on and on and on. And that's pretty boring, right? And hard to connect with. Nobody feels anything when you tell your experience. Remember, your credibility is based on both your expertise and your humanity. Stories are such powerful credibility boosters precisely because they show your expertise in a way that people can relate to. Now, instead of that, imagine if you approached your experience like my client Matthew Turton does in his story, which I'm going to share with you now. And yes, that's the same Matthew who's now a mentorship and experience product success coach. And I've got a recording of him sharing his story. Now, I'll put slides on the screen as you listen so you can hear and read at the same time.
When I was 4 years old, I refused to write my name like everyone else who'd put their names on their craft so the Sunday school teacher would know whose it was. When my mom asked me about it, I told her, "Don't worry, Mom. She knows the only one without a name on it is mine." Just imagine how it would feel to be a 9-year-old boy sitting at your desk, and no matter how hard you try, you can't write and you can't focus. As a little kid, I thought something was wrong with my pencil because the words just wouldn't pour out like they did for all the other kids. It didn't take long to realize my pencil wasn't the problem. It was obvious from a young age I wouldn't do well in a traditional classroom. According to a local mental health hospital, I was the worst case of ADHD they'd ever seen. I also had dysgraphia, which made writing extremely difficult to the point of physical pain. My mother knew that unless something dramatically changed, I wasn't going to be able to function in the world, so she decided to homeschool me. Despite her background as a teacher and a psychiatric nurse, homeschooling me was not an easy task because I wasn't able to concentrate. Every night she'd pray for guidance about how to help me succeed in life. Her faith and determination that I would have a better future gave her courage and patience to persist. When she was told there was no existing help for my extreme challenges other than medication, my mother launched into 7 years of research looking for answers, traveling North America and consulting and training with doctors, groundbreaking specialists and experts, spending thousands and thousands of dollars attempting to help me. We did every program you can imagine, and some you can't. My dad took a second job. Mom picked up a part-time job to help fund the research. She read every night for 1 to 3 hours for 7 years. When I was ready to give up after yet another failure, she just pressed on to find the next piece to our puzzle. Even though I couldn't write, I was a ferocious reader. Every week, I would get 10 new books from the library. I picked up a book from the shelf one day, and after reading several chapters, I went to find Mom and said, "Mom, I have ADHD." My mom answered, "I know that, but how do you know that?" This was a pivotal moment for me because I realized that I wasn't a freak and that my inability to control myself had a name. Knowing that there were other people with the same problems as me who were able to be successful gave me hope and determination to find answers. From that day on, my mom and I became a team. Together we learned how to break down the steps that would help me focus and then practice those steps over and over and over again. We worked on the premise that ADHD isn't so much a lack of focus, but it's an inability to control the focus. Academics became secondary to developing the foundational skills required for being a successful learner. It was devastating that at the age of 15, it would take me more than an hour to write 3 sentences with enormous effort. I still didn't have the skills to organize my thinking to get the words onto paper, even though I was very gifted in other areas. Something as simple as cleaning my room was a big challenge. It was like telling a blind person, just open your eyes and look around. If you don't have the skill, you just can't do it. Every day my mom would practice with me to specifically target and develop the parts of my brain that were responsible for dysgraphia and expressive language disorder, my inability to write. It required a lot of patience, determination, and persistence on both our parts, but mostly hers. There are moments in life that seem frozen in time. Your first bike, your first kiss, your wedding, holding your first child, and other such events. January 25th, 1999 was a momentous day in my life. That day, I wrote a full page in 15 minutes. That day, I had my breakthrough. Our home exploded with celebration, tears, and relief. It had happened. I could do it. The last 7 years of dedication had finally paid off. It was worth it all, after all. Now that I could write, my parents signed me up for the second semester, and I joined the 10th grade class without the teachers knowing anything about my past learning challenges. I didn't want to just squeak by and find out at a later date they were just passing me along. It was hard work, but I got 72 and 74%. We had a pizza party to celebrate. Years earlier, when I was 11, Mom and I had spent an exhausting day looking for new pants. After an unsuccessful shopping trip, my mom decided to splurge and take me out for lunch. It's hard to find pants when you're as tall as I am. She asked me if I had any idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. Just thinking about that moment still chokes me up. I looked at her and I said, Mom, I want to do what you do because someone needs to tell the kids they're not stupid. And so my life path was set. It took 7 years of persistent practice before I was able to control my focus. At first I did it by squeezing a ball in my pocket, but later I was able to attend 3-hour psych lectures at university and run our company all without the ball. I learned to develop the parts of my brain that were responsible for the dysgraphia and the expressive language disorder, the inability to write, and I now receive 85 to 98% in writing assignments at the University of Waterloo. As Vice President of Breakthroughs, I'm doing exactly what I envisioned as an 11-year-old boy. I show children that they are not dumb and that they can succeed. I speak at teachers' conferences around the world and help parents understand that every child can succeed by developing the right brain skills. If you or your child is struggling to learn, know that change and success are possible. Take action, don't wait. Waiting won't produce different results. Chronic failure dramatically affects self-esteem, causes behavioral problems, and produces resistance to education. For more information about how you can get your breakthrough, visit getyourbreakthrough.com/warning signs and get your free copy of the warning signs checklist.
Can you identify with Matthew? Would you take your children to Matthew or refer a friend to him? Absolutely, because he shows his experience through specific details and moments in time rather than broad statements or experiences. Now it's your turn to tell the story of what led you to this moment in time when you're designing your experience product. Your next mission is optional, so should you choose to accept it, your next mission is to write your product origin story. Whether you choose to write a few sentences, a few paragraphs, or a few pages, try to identify one specific situation, scene, or inciting moment when things changed for you, or when you made a choice to start down this path. I want to quickly take you back to a critical distinction that you learned in Niche Down Profits Up, specifically in the You've Got Problems and I've Got a Solution training. A good situation or story is like a scene in a movie. It happens in the real world. It's not just an inner dialogue that someone is having with themselves. A situation happens in a real world context, a specific time and place. A situation usually incorporates one or more of the 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, or taste. A situation has a beginning and an end. While it may be a reoccurring situation, it still has a beginning and an end. For example, being overweight is not a situation, but there are plenty of situations that could highlight being overweight, such as setting your wedding date. That's a situation. Getting winded as you pick up your child is a situation. Looking in the mirror each morning is a situation. Getting a diabetes diagnosis from your doctor is a situation. Trying to get into your skinny jeans is a situation. So can you see the difference? It's a very powerful distinction when it comes to marketing and storytelling. If you can situate your product origin story in a specific moment in time in your life, it's going to be much easier for your audience to be able to connect emotionally with you, and more importantly, connect emotionally with themselves and why they need to take action. So as soon as this video ends, I invite you to identify a specific situation, scene, or inciting moment that started or helped you on the path to where you are now. Then flesh out that moment into a powerful origin story that will captivate and connect with your audience. Then, in the next video, you're going to work on step 5 of the 5-part product sales sequence. We'll be deep diving into step 4, Tell Me More, in module 3 of this program, Crafting the Perfect Experience. Since your bird's eye view and product features are really a core part of what you're delivering through your product. In the meantime, in the next training, you're going to identify some specific credibility or social proof that you can use to convey your expertise and help someone make the choice to trust you and buy from you. Now go out there and live your message.